Some of the biggest, known as megachurches, are facing challenges as the culture around organized religion changes.
Some weird stuff happening with Joel Osteen's church. Some strange videos are coming out.
It had about 6,000 people on a Sunday. It's still a large.
16,000 seats, designed to be filled, built for noise, movement, applause. Today, entire sections are roped off, not because of a crisis, not because of a shutdown, but because people didn't come back. Joel Osteen still preaches from the same stage. The lights still turn on. The cameras still roll. Yet the emptiness keeps spreading. And the most troubling part isn't that the crowd is smaller. It's that nothing he does seems to stop it. See this with your own eyes. Drop where you're watching from below and stick around with us. There's a lot more coming that you won't want to miss. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's continue. Lakewood Church did not grow by accident. It was engineered. Long before the seats went empty, Lakewood mastered something most churches never learned: how to scale belief. Not deepen it, scale it. When Joel Osteen took over in 1999, he didn't come from seminary halls. He came from behind cameras. He understood framing, lighting, pacing. He knew how messages land when they're meant for millions, not dozens. So the message changed. Sermons became shorter, simpler, predictable. No long detours into doctrine. No heavy language about guilt or judgment. Each week followed a familiar rhythm: hope, positivity, momentum. You were told better days were coming, that favor was near, that setbacks were temporary. And the room responded. By 2005, Lakewood moved into a former sports arena, 16,000 seats, massive screens, a stage built for distance, not intimacy. This wasn't just a church anymore, it was a system. Everything supported growth: the sound, the visuals, the branding. People didn't need to know the Bible well, they just needed to feel encouraged. And for a long time, that was enough. But growth has a hidden cost. When success becomes the metric, everything else adjusts to protect it. Hard questions slow momentum. Depth creates friction. Silence feels risky. So the system optimized for what worked: more people, more reach, more consistency, and fewer reasons for anyone to feel uncomfortable. It looked unstoppable from the outside. But systems built for growth rarely know how to handle stillness. And they struggle even more when people stop moving altogether. Because when the crowd thins, what remains isn't the message, it's the structure beneath it. And that structure was about to be tested in ways no one at Lakewood had prepared for. Every system runs on assumptions. Lakewood's was never spoken out loud, but it shaped every decision. People come for spiritual growth. If they keep showing up, the system is working. For years, attendance was treated as proof. Full rooms meant healthy faith. Bigger crowds meant stronger belief. But that link was never tested. Long before the pandemic, church researchers were asking an uncomfortable question: were people actually growing or just attending? One of the most influential megachurch leaders in America asked that question publicly. The answer shocked him. The data showed that high participation didn't guarantee depth. People volunteered, they joined groups, they attended every week, yet many felt stalled. They described their faith as passive, like something they consumed, not practiced. The rooms were full, but something was missing. At Lakewood, the system kept running anyway, because questioning the assumption meant questioning the entire structure. If people weren't coming for depth, what were they coming for? The environment, the energy, the feeling of being lifted by thousands of others at once. That kind of experience is powerful, but it's fragile. It depends on bodies in seats, on music swelling at the right moment, on lights, timing, and shared emotion. Take those away and the message has to stand on its own. No crowd, no momentum, no background noise. That moment was coming, and when it arrived, it didn't announce itself with conflict or protest. It arrived quietly, when people stayed home, opened a laptop, and realized the experience felt very different without the room. What many discovered surprised them. Not anger, not rebellion, just a question they hadn't asked before. What am I actually getting from this? Once that question forms, it doesn't go away, and it was about to spread far beyond Lakewood's walls. The story most people tell begins in 2020, but the numbers tell a quieter story. Years before lockdowns, megachurch growth was slowing, not collapsing, not yet, just flattening. At Lakewood, attendance was still massive, but it stopped climbing the way it once had. The explosive growth years were over. New buildings weren't needed. New services weren't added. The machine had reached its ceiling. At the same time, the culture outside was shifting. Houston grew wider, not closer. Commutes got longer. Sundays became fragmented. Younger adults moved differently. They changed jobs often. They distrusted large institutions. They questioned polished certainty. They didn't leave loudly. They drifted. Many still believed. They just didn't feel anchored to one place. Inside the church, the message stayed the same. Consistency had been the advantage. Now it became a weakness. Week after week, the themes repeated. Hope, increase, momentum. For long-time members, it began to feel familiar. Too familiar. Some turned to podcasts, others to books. Some found smaller churches that asked harder questions. But most didn't make a dramatic exit. They simply attended less. And that kind of decline is easy to miss. It doesn't show up in headlines. It hides behind still large numbers. Until something breaks the routine. When the pandemic forced people to stop attending altogether, it didn't create the doubt. It removed the habit. And once the habit was gone, people could finally see what had already been happening. Attendance hadn't been proof of depth. It had been proof of momentum. And momentum, once interrupted, doesn't restart on command. That realization didn't hit all at once. It arrived one Sunday at a time. And when churches reopened, leaders expected a return. What they got instead was silence, and a room that felt larger than it ever had before.
When Lakewood closed its doors, the assumption was comfort. This would be temporary, a pause, a brief interruption. So the system shifted online. The cameras stayed, the lighting stayed. The sermons streamed into living rooms across the country. On paper, nothing was missing, but something felt different. At home, there was no crowd noise, no shared laughter, no surge of energy when the music swelled, just a screen and a voice. For some, the shift felt fine at first, convenient even, but over time, a realization crept in. The message hadn't changed because it didn't need to. It had always relied on the room. Without the scale, the repetition became clear. The same phrases, the same promises. Better days are coming. Favor is near. Separated from the experience, people began comparing. They listened to other pastors, read theology, found voices that asked questions instead of smoothing them over, and they discovered something Lakewood could never compete with online: choice. High-quality sermons were everywhere now, from scholars, from small churches, from people with nothing to sell. The advantage megachurches once held, professional production, no longer mattered. Everyone had access, and once people realized they could get similar encouragement without driving, parking, and sitting in a massive room, the habit didn't reform. When Lakewood reopened, the cameras captured a hard truth. People didn't rush back, not because they were angry, but because the experience they were coming for had already been replaced, and what remained, the message alone, wasn't enough to pull them back into a 16,000-seat room. That wasn't a temporary problem. It was structural, and structures don't heal with time. They either adapt or reveal their limits. When restrictions lifted, church leaders expected a rebound. They planned for it. They prepared seats. They reopened doors. At Lakewood, the assumption was simple. Once people could return, they would. But the numbers told a different story. Attendance didn't bounce back. It stabilized lower, then slowly fell again. The empty sections stayed closed. Services were consolidated. What once felt temporary became routine. Part of the reason was practical. Life had changed. People moved farther away. Work schedules shifted. Sundays filled with other commitments. But there was something deeper. The pandemic broke the spell of inevitability. For years, Lakewood felt essential, an anchor, a fixed point. Now, it felt optional, and once something becomes optional, it competes with everything else. Joel Osteen didn't change the message. He couldn't. The system was built on consistency. Any shift risked alienating the audience that remained. So the sermons stayed familiar, encouraging, predictable. But predictability no longer felt safe. During crisis, people wanted language for suffering, for grief, for loss. The promise that everything would work out felt thin in the face of death and hardship. Some stayed, many didn't. And here's the part most people missed. Lakewood didn't collapse financially. There was no scandal, no forced closure. The church remained solvent, well-funded, stable, which made the decline harder to address because nothing was technically wrong, except the room kept getting quieter. And when an institution survives but stops shaping people's lives, the loss doesn't show up on balance sheets. It shows up in absence, and absence is harder to explain away. From the outside, the solution looks simple. Change the message, add depth, shift direction. But systems built at scale don't pivot easily. Lakewood was designed around one voice, one tone, one expectation. Joel Osteen's sermons are the product, the brand, the anchor. For decades, that consistency was the strength. Now, it's the limit. Joel Osteen is in his 60s. There is no clear successor, no public transition plan. Megachurch history shows a pattern. Founder-led movements often shrink once the founder fades, not because the leader fails, but because the structure depends on them. Lakewood also faces a different problem. It doesn't need to change to survive. The church carries no long-term debt. It has reserves. The broadcasts still reach millions worldwide. Financial pressure, the thing that forces reinvention, doesn't exist, so the incentive to take risks is low. At the same time, the room itself works against change. A 16,000-seat arena demands scale. Intimacy doesn't translate well on that stage. Smaller churches can experiment. Lakewood can't without exposing the emptiness even more. And there's one more complication. The decline isn't loud. There were no protests, no mass walkouts, no scandal driving headlines. People aren't rejecting Joel Osteen. They're drifting past him. That kind of loss offers no clear enemy to fight, no mistake to correct, just a slow fading of relevance. And that's the hardest problem of all. Because you can apologize for a failure, you can rebuild after a scandal, but how do you respond when the world simply moves on? That question now sits at the center of Lakewood's future, and it's not one a single sermon can answer. Lakewood Church still stands. The lights still turn on, the stage is still polished, the broadcasts still travel across borders. From the outside, it looks intact, but buildings remember what they were built for. A room designed for thousands feels different when it holds hundreds. Silence stretches longer. Empty space draws attention. Across the country, similar spaces are facing the same future. Some will be sold, others repurposed. A few will keep going, smaller, quieter, unchanged. What's ending isn't belief, it's a model. The idea that scale equals strength, that growth proves depth, that consistency alone can carry faith across generations. Younger believers are not disappearing, they're redistributing. Into small congregations, into homes, into communities where doubt is allowed and questions aren't smoothed over. Lakewood was built for a different moment, a moment when media was rare, when optimism felt enough, when crowds validated truth. That moment has passed. Joel Osteen still speaks the same words, but the room no longer answers back the way it once did. And maybe that's the point.
What happens next won't be decided by one church or one pastor. It's being shaped quietly, in smaller rooms, without cameras, without stages, while massive auditoriums wait. Not for a scandal, not for a collapse, just for people. And if they don't return, the question won't be why they left. It will be what kind of faith can survive when the crowd is gone, and whether anyone still knows how to build it.